The morning begins with silence. A cool mist drifts above a field washed in first light, each blade of grass jeweled with dew. The world, for a fleeting moment, holds its breath, and then from somewhere unseen comes the hum, faint, rhythmic, alive. It swells until the very air seems to vibrate. The sound is not random. It is ancient. It is the heartbeat of the hive. From the edge of the meadow, a honeybee lifts from a wildflower. Her wings slice the sunlight into halos. She is impossibly small, yet what she carries will ripple through forests, farms, and entire civilizations. Clinging to her legs are specks of gold, grains of pollen, the dust of creation itself. To the casual eye, it is just powder. To science, it is one of nature's most complete foods, a universe compressed into a speck. To the bee, it is life. Each grain of pollen is a microcosm, a tiny sphere sculpted by evolution with grooves and spines so intricate that no two plant species share the same design. Under the microscope, they look like celestial bodies, stars, suns, planets, each encoding a plant's genetic signature. A bee does not collect pollen by chance. As she lands upon a flower, her body hums with static electricity generated by the rapid movement of her wings. The pollen leaps toward her, magnetized by invisible forces. She grooms herself meticulously, pressing the dust into golden pellets with her forelegs, mixing it with a trace of nectar and enzymes. What she fashions in that moment is something extraordinary. Bee pollen, a substance more complex than any human-made supplement, a matrix of proteins, amino acids, lipids, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants arranged in perfect biological harmony. For millennia, this simple act, a bee visiting a flower, has been the quiet foundation of nearly every meal we eat. Without pollen transfer, there would be no fruits, no vegetables, no seeds. Yet beyond pollination lies a deeper marvel. The pollen itself, transformed and preserved by bees into a nutrient powerhouse unmatched in the natural world. Follow her now as she returns home. The hum of her wings merges with the chorus of thousands more. Within the hive, the air is warm and thick with scent. Wax, honey, propolis, and life. The worker passes her pollen load to younger bees, who tamp it into waxy cells and coat it with a thin film of honey and enzymes. This becomes bee bread, the colony's main source of protein. Here, inside the darkness of the hive, pollen ferments slowly. Lactobacillus bacteria multiply, breaking down the outer shell of each grain, releasing nutrients, and creating an environment rich in probiotics. It is a process not unlike the making of yogurt or sourdough, a living chemistry that sustains an empire. Modern research has uncovered what the bees have always known. This fermented pollen is a nutritional masterpiece. It contains every amino acid essential to human life, including those the body cannot synthesize on its own. It holds vitamins B, C, D, and E, minerals like magnesium, potassium, calcium, zinc, and iron, flavonoids that quench free radicals, and enzymes that aid digestion and repair. To put it simply, in a spoonful of bee pollen lies the blueprint of vitality. When scientists first began analyzing bee pollen under electron microscopes, they were astonished. Each granule was coated in a thin shell called exine, made of sporopollenin, one of the most indestructible organic materials known. This outer armor protects the pollen's DNA for thousands of years, surviving heat, radiation, and decay. Archaeologists have found intact pollen grains preserved in ice cores and sediments dating back millions of years, still identifiable, still telling the story of vanished ecosystems. Inside that shell lies a nutritional core. Unlike the sterile powder we see on a flower's stamen, bee pollen is biologically activated. Bees add enzymes that unlock the nutrients, turning inert plant dust into bioavailable food. Each pellet harvested from a hive can contain pollen from dozens of plant species, a mosaic of meadows and orchards condensed into a single bite. In laboratory tests, bee pollen has shown remarkable effects, boosting immune response, reducing inflammation, improving endurance, and accelerating recovery in athletes. Its antioxidants neutralize reactive oxygen species, protecting cells from aging. Its flavonoids strengthen capillaries and support the liver's detoxifying enzymes. Even its fatty acids, linoleic and linolenic, are in proportions close to human plasma. Yet, perhaps most intriguingly, bee pollen contains trace elements of almost every known micronutrient required by life. It is as though evolution, in its infinite economy, condensed an ecosystem's nutrition into a particle of dust. For the bee, pollen is not just food, it is fuel. A colony consumes more than 50 kilograms of it each year to raise new generations. Each larva, sealed in its wax cell, depends on the protein and amino acids derived from pollen to build wings, muscles, and brain tissue. Without pollen, the hive starves, no matter how much honey it stores. In experimental hives deprived of pollen, workers grow smaller, their immune systems weaken, and their lifespans shorten dramatically. It is pollen that drives the engines of flight, that allows bees to traverse kilometers of landscape daily in search of bloom. This correlation extends beyond the hive, the health of global pollinators, and by extension, our agriculture, is inseparably linked to the richness and diversity of pollen sources in the environment. Monocultures starve bees of variety. Chemical pesticides compromise their ability to forage. To safeguard the miracle of pollen, humanity must protect the meadows and wild margins where flowers still bloom in chaotic abundance. Though the bee's relationship with pollen predates humankind, our species has not been slow to notice. In the 20th century, biologists studying apiaries began to collect small amounts of bee pollen from traps at hive entrances. They found that even in tiny doses, it delivered an astonishing concentration of nutrients. Athletes reported increased stamina, convalescence, quicker recovery, researchers heightened alertness. In 1975, the Food and Agriculture Organization described bee pollen as a perfect food. Clinical studies since then have revealed immune-modulating properties, beneficial effects on the liver, and even anti-allergic potential. In laboratory animals, bee pollen improved memory and slowed oxidative damage to neurons. But for all its promise, science also learned humility. The composition of bee pollen is never fixed. It shifts with every season, every region, every bloom. The pollen from clover differs from that of buckwheat or wild mustard. Like wine, its flavor and chemistry reflect its terroir, the living landscape from which it comes. In that variability lies beauty. Each spoonful is not just nutrition but geography, a record of where bees have flown, of what has flowered, of how ecosystems pulse with change. At a deeper level, pollen is language. Through it, plants and pollinators communicate across species. The scents and colors of blossoms are messages designed to lure bees. The pollen itself carries proteins that, once consumed, trigger hormonal and microbial cascades inside the bee, influencing her behavior and even the microbiome of the colony. Recent genomic studies have shown that pollen's biochemical diversity supports the hive's collective health. Polyfloral pollen diets enhance detoxification genes in bees, helping them withstand pesticides and disease. Monofloral diets suppress them. Diversity equals resilience. The lesson mirrors our own biology. Variety nourishes strength. Every field of mixed wildflowers becomes a symphony of nutrition. Every monoculture, a silence. When we cultivate landscapes that sing, bees thrive, and we thrive with them. To study bee pollen is to look into a mirror of our own interdependence. Each granule reminds us that energy moves through networks, that no life is isolated. The bee gathers pollen not for herself, but for her community. Her labor sustains thousands she will never meet. In doing so, she keeps entire ecosystems alive. Human beings, too, are pollinators in spirit. Our ideas, innovations, and compassion are forms of pollen, small gifts that travel from one mind to another, fertilizing growth. When we act with awareness of the greater hive, the planet, we become part of nature's continuous exchange. Modern nutritionists sometimes call bee pollen a micro-superfood, but even that phrase undersells it. Laboratory analyses have cataloged more than 250 active substances: carotenoids, polyphenols, nucleic acids, phytosterols, and peptides. These interact synergistically, amplifying one another's effects. One study found that bee pollen increased red blood cell production in anemic subjects. Another showed improved liver regeneration in animals exposed to toxins. In human trials, daily doses enhanced antioxidant status within weeks. Yet perhaps most compelling is its potential in immune modulation. Pollen seems to teach the immune system tolerance, reducing allergic overreaction. An elegant irony, given that pollen is also what triggers hay fever in so many. Researchers are only beginning to map the complexity of this natural cocktail. Unlike synthetic multivitamins, bee pollen's components exist in balanced ratios, wrapped in a biological context the body recognizes. It is, in every sense, whole food. But even as we marvel, we must face a sobering truth. Bee populations worldwide are in decline. Habitat loss, pesticides, parasites, and climate disruption threaten the creatures that gift us pollen. Each vanished hive erases a library of genetic memory and local adaptation. Scientists and beekeepers are racing to understand, restore, and protect. Fields are being replanted with wildflowers. Pesticide-free corridors are spreading across farmlands. Citizen beekeepers are emerging in cities, their rooftops and balconies buzzing with new life. The survival of bees and of pollen's golden promise depends on this shared awakening. In the end, protecting bee pollen is not about a supplement. It is about preserving the circulatory system of the earth itself. From every grain of pollen comes a message of proportion and reverence. It reminds us that nourishment begins with diversity, that strength arises from cooperation, that miracles are often microscopic. It teaches that abundance is a cycle, not a hoard. The bee gathers not to own, but to give. In the measured hum of the hive, there is no greed, no waste, only balance. The bees have mastered what humanity still struggles to learn: how to live richly without exhausting the source. 1. Interdependence is strength. Every organism, from bee to flower to human, exists within a shared web of exchange. 2. Diversity sustains life. Just as bees need varied pollen, human societies and ecosystems thrive on variety and inclusion. 3. Small acts matter. The tiniest grain of pollen feeds entire worlds, proof that impact is not measured by size, but by connection. 4. Nature is the original chemist. No laboratory can yet replicate the balanced complexity of bee pollen's nutrition. 5. Respect sustains abundance. To protect bees is to protect ourselves, for our well-being flows from theirs. 6. Wonder is wisdom. To look closely at the ordinary, a speck of dust, a bee in flight, is to rediscover the sacred in the everyday. And so, as the sun sinks low over the meadow and the hum of wings softens into dusk, we are left with a quiet truth. Within that golden dust lies the story of life's endurance. Bee pollen, the superfood you never heard of, is not just nourishment for the body, but a hymn to the interconnected miracle of existence. If this story has stirred your curiosity, let it not end here. Stay with us, follow the trail of science and wonder, and discover more of the unseen marvels that shape our world. Subscribe and keep the hum alive.